Welcome to the Radio Beaver podcast, looking at all things Hampton and Richmond Borough Football Club. It's safe to say that it's been a very interesting week, not just for the Beavers, but for all National League South football clubs. And we decided that we needed to sit down with Chairman Jacques le Bars and also Manager Gary McCann and also COVID officer Phil Weller to try and make sense of all the things that have been happening. Thanks very much to all the supporters for sending in questions. There were some duplications and similarities in topics, but hopefully we've covered everything that you want to know. And I suppose the last thing, if you like this episode and also like what we do at Hampton and Richmond Borough in the media department, then please donate at hrbfc.live. And yeah, we will continue to keep up this great coverage that we've been doing the last few weeks, and hopefully we will have to do we'll have to do some different things maybe in the forthcoming weeks with no football, but we will try and make this as interesting and as easy as possible for supporters to bear, depending on what does actually happen, who knows. But anyway, enough from me, and I'm going to press play now on the interview that I recorded earlier on with Jacques, Gary and Phil. Hope you enjoy it, and yes, up the Beavers. It's been a busy week for all National League South football clubs, especially the Beavers. Lots of things happening off the pitch, which we obviously need to catch up on and try and make a little bit of sense of. There's obviously things changing all the time. You know, there aren't all the answers that people probably want at this stage, but at least it's a chance for the fans to find out exactly what has been going on and maybe what position the club has taken, because there's been no shortage of football clubs this week making clear their feelings one way or another, whichever way they decide. Gary, it's been quite a week, hasn't it?
Yep. A week in football, they say, is a long time, Seb, didn't they? This time last week, we're preparing for a game against Ebbsfleet. Everything looking hunky-dory. Yes, we had some fears in the background that the suspension was being discussed. There was obviously some financial issues that still hadn't been resolved, and there was some concerns on all the fronts of the football club. And what's happened this week is really just completely derailed us, and it's left us a little despondent, Seb, if I'm being honest. There's definitely a lot of despondency in the group with especially with where we find ourselves in the table and everything else. So I had to put a long message out yesterday in the group for everyone to stay positive, because most of it was negative. There was a lot of negative feedback coming in that group, and I tried to keep them positive and keep them focused and tell them that it's a 2-week suspension as it stands. No one knows that it's more than that at the moment, and we've got to continue to keep doing what we're doing and really just keep focusing on what the targets and goals were back in October when we started. It's out of our hands. We can't control the uncontrollables, and we've just got to look after our own house, which is what we'll be doing.
Yeah, of course. And I know, Gary, you've always been really positive about these side of things and hoping that things work themselves out and we can just get back to playing football one way or another, whether that be during the first lockdown, the second lockdown. So it is disappointing, and like I said, the despondency for the players and certainly your staff as well. Obviously, I know worked so hard to prepare the team so well, and we saw that last weekend at Ebbsfleet. But Jacques, is it a similar feeling for you, a bit of despondency that we've got to this stage?
Yeah, I think so. We've had to jump a number of hurdles to get this season up and running, and we thought we were in full flow with the fans coming back, and then obviously we saw that curtailed pretty quickly, but we at least thought we'd still have football for the remainder of the season. So to now be in this situation with so much uncertainty about the future of the 2021 season, it's very disappointing and very frustrating, not least because of that huge amount of effort that you've talked about already, that the players and management team and everyone behind the scenes at the football club has put in to date. Not least the money that's been spent to date. It looks like at the moment that could well all be wasted effort. So very frustrating, very disappointing, and obviously we'll be working hard to try and get football back on as soon as possible.
Yeah, and obviously I suppose the main thing that started all this, and I know Gary mentioned it pre-match last week as well, but the talk about this second lot of funding. Obviously, we'd had the first lot of funding from the National Lottery, and that has obviously had its own discussions elsewhere, but we received that money, which allowed us to start the season and allowed us to carry on as is. When did you first hear about the fact that the second batch would be loans? What was your initial reaction to this?
Well, I mean, to be honest, there had been rumours flying about for a fair while since the end of last year that a situation like this, I'd like to, put on record that I think initially we have to say that the National League board have had a very difficult time with everything that's happened so far this year, as everyone has. To try and run a competition under those conditions has been very difficult. So primarily, they did very well in securing that initial funding with the grants that came for the October, November, December period, and that was very well received. But under the understanding that obviously the second tranche of grants would also be in that format as well. To hear that there was this possible switch from grants to loans was obviously extremely concerning immediately, because we knew what impact that would have, not just on our football club, but on the National League as a whole, because fundamentally it was the promise of that 6 months worth of funding to cover the lost revenues and incomes from the supporter attendance that enabled us to commence the competition in the first place. So to have that rug pulled from underneath you, was a surprise and not a nice one.
The DCMS are very vehement on the fact that they'd said that it would be loans or it wouldn't be grants. Obviously, Hungerford, I'm just looking at there's been statements coming out all week. I know Hungerford, the chairman this morning, has said the same, that it was always his understanding that it was grants, not loans. And it obviously would have been very different if it hadn't been. What were the club aware? Was it always assumption by the club that it would be grants, not loans?
Well, it wasn't an assumption. It was what we were told. And that's, as I said, that's why we commenced that under those conditions. It's basic mathematics, right? You've got wage bills up in the hundreds of thousands of pounds, which clubs have got to cover. And unless you've got an Abramovich or a Sheikh Mansour sat at the top of your table, that's not going to be covered without the revenues that you would normally pull in during the season. It's a no-brainer that we had to have some sort of support to enable football to start. And that wasn't support that was going to last for 3 months. It needed to be support for the whole season, based on the fact that we didn't know when fans were coming back. Now, I think this is where probably the confusion has come in, although I would say that the disappointment here is that we don't have anything in black and white provided by the National League, which you would assume they would have in place with the DCMS at the start of all this. But I think the confusion has arisen because it was a case of, well, we'll go 3 months and see if fans are back in, and then you'll get your second lot of grants after that if they're not. Obviously, the fans aren't back, but the money hasn't arrived in the form that we thought it would. So that is why I think we have the situation we have at the moment. I don't think the DCMS probably expected fans to be out of the grounds for so long. That's the honest truth, and that's my view on it. And that the fact that they're not back in the grounds means that all of a sudden they're on the hook for that second 11 million, and they've decided to move the goalposts.
Yeah, and of course, and obviously the big thing this week, when this became clear that very much so it was going to be grants, it was going to be loans, not grants. I keep getting confused myself. But yeah, obviously there was 3 options presented to all National League clubs, and this is what we've had the most questions about from fans. So there were 3 options. The first option was clubs to accept the loan, or the second option was to accept the loan but via the National League. And the third one was obviously to suspend the season. Can you tell the fans what decision the club made on that?
Yeah, I had a call along with a number of other representatives from some of our member clubs on Wednesday, Zoom call with the board, where these options were put to us. The first, as you said, was effectively for clubs to individually go to Sport England and apply for loans, which would then enter you into a process of investigation into requirements, and then a panel would be sitting to make a decision on that loan. That was not a non-starter. I think for us and every other club, in that it wasn't what was agreed at the start. We're not in the business, having spent the last 4 years, trying to put this club on a steady footing, to all of a sudden start taking out 100,000, 200,000 pounds worth of loans, and that was just not a realistic idea. Option 2, which for all intents and purposes was option 1, but without the application process, to be quite honest, would have been the loan coming to the National League rather than to the individual clubs, and then the National League would hand that money out as grants, inverted commas, However, it wouldn't really be grants, it would still be loans, because ultimately the National League would have to pay that back. They would have to utilise the monies that normally go out in central funding to the member clubs on a yearly basis. Each year we get monies coming in from the league to compete. At our level, it's obviously quite a lot lower than the National League. But again, it really was just dressing up option one. So that again, that didn't really become an option for us. And that left option three, which is a suspension of football. Now, with the way that the club's been playing, the team's been playing, and on the back of last season when we were so cruelly curtailed, when I think we were in a pretty healthy position, I think we're in an even better position this year. The hard work the guys have put in has seen the team go from strength to strength, in my opinion. And so the last thing we wanted to do was stop playing football, not least because it keeps a lot of us staying on a Saturday or a Tuesday just to get out and watch something. And I'm sure it does for those who aren't lucky enough to come to the ground, just to be able to watch it on our magnificent stream. I'll just drop that in there. Well done, Seb, on that, and Dave and Jason running that is something to look forward to. So to have to vote on suspending that football, I mean, I did write in my response to the National League, it is a very reluctant yes that we do have to suspend, just so that we could resolve the situation, because it made no sense to continue to play games of football and spend money, which you can't recover, without knowing exactly where the season's going. It was very reluctant, but we had to go for that third option.
Gary, I just want to bring you back in. Obviously, as a manager and as you and the way the team are playing at the moment, you would have obviously loved to be playing, Slough on Tuesday night there. But do you understand why the club have went for option three in this instance?
I fully understand, Seb. I mean, I think selfishly, and we have to look at my job is to look after the long-term future of the football club with anything I spend or what I do. And I think that comes to the forefront of this decision. From a football perspective, nobody in that top 7 or top 8 are going to want a suspension to the league. I'm sure not one of them, if they had a vote that was a realistic vote. The three options wasn't for me. I said that to Jax as soon as they were presented to us, that none of them, it was like all three of them were bad options. The best of the bad was obviously to suspend for a period of time and try and fight our corner to turn the loans into grants. But we, as a change room, and that's why I say that the despondency was in the change room, because we honestly felt with the position we found ourselves in the league and the games that we'd already played, Seb, that's the big factor. You look at the run of games that we've had Dorking twice, we've had St Albans twice, the teams that are right in and amongst it. We've had a tough run of games, and we find ourselves in a real healthy position in the league. I didn't fear anything really in the divisions. We were moving very much towards success, and for it to be suspended is disappointing. But we have to listen. The long-term future of the football club is the most important, factor in all of this, and I fully respect Jack's and Ben's and the board's decision to vote that way. And reluctantly, I'd have had to say I would have voted that option as well. It is what it is. It wasn't a fair set of choices with where we started back in October. There's not a chance, Seb, let's get this straight. There's not a chance that there's a football club within the National League, the National South and the National North would have started this season off with the fear of these grants being turned into loans 3 months down the line. There'd be no ball kicked, and that's fact. I don't see that as being, and that's what I think the DCMS are getting away from. We've all started this season off with a viewpoint that we will be funded and we'd have grants until such time spectators come back through the gates, and that's not been possible. So it's common sense tells you that it has to continue as a grant format. Otherwise, we can't play. And even today, seeing the National League continuing, because their viewpoint in the discussions were that their season needed to start. I'd like to see where they're going to be in a week, 10 days time when they're dealing, because their budgets and their expenditures are a lot greater than most of the teams in the Conference South. So it's a situation that no one wants to be in, but we've got to deal with it.
That's a good point. We wouldn't have started if we'd only get 3 months.
For sure.
So for all that the DCMS are saying, Jack and Gary, then the whole point is the money that they've already given to the National League clubs is just essentially wasted if we do suspend the season, because why would you? That's £11 million. Not just that, but also the money that clubs have spent on top of their own money. And not just that, but also the volunteer hours and all the things would have just been, could easily be described as a waste of time, essentially, unfortunately, as bad as that sounds.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. You alluded to it earlier. All the efforts and monies that have been spent to date would effectively be for nothing. And I think that's the most puzzling thing around the decision being made by the DCMS at this point, if it is indeed a U-turn. We're assuming it is taking on trust what the National League Board have said and what was agreed with all the clubs before the season started. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me to effectively write off the money that they've already allocated in grants. It's very frustrating and confusing to try and understand why they've made this decision.
We've got a question from a fan, Richard, who says, can the rationale behind the 2-week hiatus be explained? He says, my opinion, the better option may have been to play on these 2 weeks to give the league and government time to sort it out. And if then nothing could be sorted out, then they could abandon the season then. What would you say to someone like Richard?
Well, I can tell you that the decision was made by the National League Board, I think, based on the responses from the member clubs. Now, obviously, there is a gap between the National League and the National League South and North on this, but effectively, I think, taking into account all the responses that they received after that meeting on Wednesday, they decided that a lot of clubs were already making their own decisions, especially at our level, and there were statements going out from the likes of Concord and Haven, and I think Slough saying we're not going to play. So why play those games if the season isn't going to conclude? And I think that's possibly why the decision was taken. Although personally, and it's something I think probably a view that's shared by a number of us, to have the National League playing and the North and South not playing, all that does is widen the gap between the two. So that is another concern. I mean, we'd probably park that for another day, but it should be all or nothing, really. So in my own view, it should be the National League and the North and South doing the same thing and following the same path. So for them to play and us not to play, that's a strange one. Yes, we could have played the next 2 weeks, but who knows where we would have been after that.
I must add, I mean, look, I fully respect the 3 teams in question that Jack says that their reasoning is behind COVID-related safety issues, but this is maybe 4 weeks late, maybe longer. We find ourselves in a position where things are improving slightly. You look at the amount of games that's being played today in the National and how many games would have been played today. There wasn't too many games curtailed, was there, in regards to COVID issues this weekend. So you could see an improvement. You go back before Christmas, that's when the period of suspension should have happened, or the break should have occurred if it was for safety reasons. It just seems a bit of a coincidence to me. We've played for such a long time under the protocols that we've played and we've dealt with, and like Jack has said, we've jumped over so many hurdles to get to where we are now. I don't honestly believe it's a safety decision.
Phil, did you have something to add there, or something to ask, or just to highlight?
I just want to kind of chip in and I suppose echo what has been certainly at least implied, is that this break is not being portrayed as a COVID-safe break at all. It's openly a politically motivated break to try and restore the grant situation. There was definitely a sense among the COVID officers, who have their own WhatsApp group with about 50 of the 66 on it, that the break should have been earlier. If you were looking at it from a COVID angle, the real high pressure time was start of the year, and there was pressure from the COs, and in our case supported very much by our medical officer Fadi, that this is the time to take the break, early Jan, start of Jan, basically, because that was when everything was going out of control, and it's now coming back a little bit under control, I agree, but I have to say, this from purely COVID point of view, this break is not all bad news. From a footballing point of view and a financial point of view, it's become a necessity, but there is a chance now that we might be able to restart with better COVID figures, a better position among all the clubs, lower R rate. I hate using the word positive in this climate, but there may be a positive that comes out of this if those other issues can be resolved, and we might be able to Well, just start on a more stable footing in terms of the personnel available across the number of clubs and fewer cancellations in the future. That's the hope.
Good point, Phil. It's a good point. Well, talking about what is going to happen in the next 2 weeks, Jack, what are you aware of what the National League will be doing?
What needs to happen is the loans to be turned into proper grants. And so the DCMS needs to be lobbied within Parliament. And at the beginning of the week, along with all the other member clubs, we were asked by the National League Board to get in contact with our local MPs. Now, Munira Wilson, our local MP, has already gone to bat for us in the House when this all kicked off in the first place, and gave her support to the football club. Was one of those who was asking for the grants to be provided in the first place. I sent a letter out to Munira this week asking for her continued support of the football club and the National League as a whole to ensure that the DCMS review the decision taken on the loans and look to convert those into grants. And I think what we'll see over the next couple of weeks is a more concerted effort by the National League to make this point heard and for a reconsideration of the position that the DCMS is currently taking on that money. And fingers crossed that is a successful campaign, because if it isn't, then I really do worry for where this season will end.
I suppose let's be positive and hope that this campaign does get legs, and maybe some of the things can be highlighted. Like we said, the money the DCMS already spent and the money that the government might have spent in furlough payments might actually be more. I know Munira has been fantastic supporting the football club, and she even mentioned Hampton and Richmond Borough Football Club in Parliament, which I think might be a first. But would you suggest that Hampton and Richmond Borough fans, maybe just a polite email, just a reminder of the severity of the situation wouldn't hurt?
I think that's a very good idea, Seb. Yeah, I mean, the more voices that are calling for action on this, the better it's going to be. And I think a polite email to Munira to demonstrate exactly the people that are being affected by this lack of football, by the cessation of an environment where a lot of people, it is their only escape from the rat race, and it's something they look forward to on a weekly basis. It offers support outside of football and a hub for people to go and socialise and everything else. And we talk about being a community club, which is something we are proud to be, and something we work really hard on, and we're trying to build that base even further with a number of different initiatives, and we want to become the centre of the local community. We just have to see the appeals that we've done with the food bank and the Beaver boxes, how we are impacting positively people's lives. So it's really important that we fight the good fight, and people can play their own part by sending those emails into Munira and asking her to support the club in the House.
As this thing continues to unfold, I'm sure there'll be various things on the social media, so please keep an eye out and any retweets and shares and stuff like that. But Gary, in terms of the players over the next couple of weeks, I know you said that there's a bit of despondency, and rightly so. They're good footballers who want to play football, and it's a shame that they're not being given that opportunity due to some difficult decisions elsewhere. But I suppose it's a case of having been through this already with gaps in play and breaks in play. It's just a case of just keeping them on their toes, personal training and things like that, and just hoping that the situation resolves itself.
I've spoken to a couple of different managers in our division, just to find out what their procedures will be going forward, just to get an idea to fall in with us. I mean, we more likely have the best in the division in terms of keeping people active and players active and fit in Mark Finley. I mean, he's already put a challenge out last night that some of them, even early this morning, have participated in and got done. And we'll do the same Tuesday. We'll more likely have a Zoom training session on Tuesday, and we'll look at what we can do in the latter stages of the week going into next weekend with training schedules and such like. It's a challenge again. It's another period of rest that we've already experienced. A couple of already, Seb, so we are getting quite used to it. And Mark has been brilliant in what he's put on for them. I mean, the challenge today is 5, 10 and 15k challenges that they've got to put their videos into the group, and they need to be participating. All of the group needs to be participating, and it needs to be completed by 10 o'clock tonight. The distances that we track within their vests that they wear, their interactive vests, that allows us to give them all individual stats to follow today, and it's done as honestly as professional as you could possibly find. And they're, as I say, they're already deep into doing that, most of the group. So we'll do everything we possibly can to keep them in shape. I mean, nothing replicates match fitness and match sharpness. And another 2 weeks out, again, we'll see some complications in performance, I'm sure. I said to you in the video the weekend, the fine details of the offensive area of the pitches are always the areas that suffer, with it be coming back in from pre-season or having these sustained breaks. It's them fine details where the efficiency and the accuracy is the main aspect. It suffers. We'll do everything we can to keep us in a good place and be ready if, and I use the word if, for which does happen. I mean, there's a fear and I suppose a doubt in all of our minds that, are we going to resolve this situation? We've got to be positive and we've got to try and stay positive. But, let's hope that in a couple of weeks' time we're back out of the Bev and playing some football.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jack, just if we're trying to remain positive, and there's been a couple of questions from fans about this, has there even been any discussion about, shall we say, a slightly reduced ending to the season? There's been various things floating about on social media, maybe the top half split up in top and bottom half split into things. Has there even been anything like that?
No, we're not even at that stage yet. I think it's is a process that needs to be gone through. The financial and the funding issue is the primary one. If we can get a positive resolution on that, then it doesn't matter. We can continue as normal. So we're not into the realms of splitting the season, only playing every other team home and every other team away, or whatever format people come out with, because they're pretty bored at the moment and there's some great ideas. I think the Project Non-League with the points per game over 2 seasons, things like that, we're not even at that stage yet. No. And I hope we don't get to it. Gary says there is a real fear. But I think we just all need to stay as positive as possible. As frustrating as this is, stay as positive as possible and believe that we will see an end to the season in a normal fashion.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. And hopefully this is all mute, but we have had a couple of questions from people who basically said, if let's just assume that this is the beginning of a suspension or curtailment, a cancellation of the season. We've had a number of fans that are worried that, look, the long-term future is the most important thing. And you guys have all said the long-term future is the most important thing, of course. And that was the reason we voted for option 3. But what is, at the moment, at this stage, what is the long-term future of the football club if the season does stop?
Well, I think it's a very good question. As I said before, we've done a hell of a lot of work to sort of not turn the club around, but modernise the club and bring it to a situation where things are clearer on our financial status, where we, can see some proper data on where the spend is and things like that, which certainly wasn't there when we came into the club. It was basically just a big black hole where people threw their money into. We're very lucky to have someone like the vice chairman on board. Ben's a very shrewd guy, and he's utilised the contacts he has within his business to establish that sort of financial database that we need to run the football club like a business. And even for a club like ours, a small club, you have to run it like a business. And we believe that the work we've done to date has, secured certainly financially the future of the football club. However, it does depend on what happens going forward. I think the worry would be if we were forced to play football without any revenues. That would certainly put the club at jeopardy, and it would put every club at jeopardy. Because without any income, how do you cover your outgoings? It's just not possible. If the season ends, we're in a pretty healthy position to I suppose, mothball the club until such time as we can start football up again. But, we have to take into account the players and the impact this will have on them. They're footballers, but they're people, and a number of them rely on that money to live on. And I think sometimes that's lost in all of this, that is beyond just playing football, it's people's livelihoods. And that's a concern for us and a concern for them, obviously. And we have to use all the mechanisms available to ensure that we support everyone as much as we can. But we also have to say that the primary concern is the health of the football club. So that's very much at the forefront, but we try and look after everyone as best we can, where we can. But it's going to be very difficult, yeah.
And Gary, I suppose you're closer to the players than than anyone. Yeah, that's a good point that Jax makes. These are semi-pro footballers who, in name only, I would say, I've seen the quality and the work they put into this. Fingers crossed it doesn't get to that stage, but is that something you're aware of and that you want to try and manage as best as possible?
You never use the word elite, Seb.
Yeah.
You use semi-professional. But yeah, I mean, look, I think when I assemble a squad of players, and I think you've seen it firsthand, and the chairman is getting very familiar with how I work. It's not just good footballers that you try and sign. You try and sign good people that morally are in a good place. They have the right understanding of what the collective is, and they appreciate the run-ins of the football club, the people that make that football club happen. I mean, our club is better than most in terms of the volunteers and the way it works. It's a very community-based club, so you want to make sure that the players can relate to that, and that's what you do. You try and assemble a good, honest group of people, and like Jax has just alluded to, they are reliant. I mean, we are at a level of football that we've worked very hard to get to, which has seen us earn our stripes, seen us get to a level of income that they become reliant of. And there's a certain amount of uncertainty around this. I know the club have done the best by the squad and everyone on one occasion already. And there's going to be some real challenges and some real decisions for us to make, because if we don't get to the stage where the season resumes, you're starting to then look again into next season and what your squad is for the season to come. It's a huge season for our football club. I think that you just again touched on it, the centenary year. I think there's going to be a lot of interest, and I sincerely hope there'll be some momentum with that as well. And I want to make sure that our squad of players, our change room is exactly where it needs to be to build on the successes of what we've done in the last 18 months. So I'll have some decisions to make and some tough decisions to make, but the players and then that changing room is always the most important part of the football club to me, because I have to make sure that's right for when they're where they need to be. So like I said, I'd already put a message in, and I will be very much in touch with them and trying to sort of alleviate their doubts and such like. But it's not easy. It's not easy for any of us. It's a challenge. It's times that we've not experienced before as a manager or as a change room, and we'll have to work through it. But with the good people that we've got at the top, like we just touched on, Ben and Jax and the board as such, like it's a proper football club, Seb, and I'm sure we'll do the right things to look after that changing room.
Yeah, let's end on a positive, and the fact that, yes, the volunteers who've put numerous hours of work into even getting us to, obviously we had fans at the Beverly back for, I think it was just one game, but it was still one game, wasn't it? And it was all the work that went in, and obviously Phil, who's on this call, that with all the work is done with the COVID thing, Faddy, and there's so many good people that to make the most of everything. But I suppose Jackson, maybe a rallying call as such, that fans are going to have to do maybe things different, I suppose. They're not just going to be able to rely on watching games and stuff like that. Emails to MPs, social media promotion and pushing. And if we get past this stage and we are in a slightly more difficult position and the season doesn't start, then obviously any income the football club can bring in, shirts, all these sort of things, those are going to be vital, especially as we're coming up to the centenary season and want to continue all the good work. And like Gary says, maintain some momentum, which over the last 18 months, the football club's really built up.
Yeah, I think we've talked about the frustrations of all of this and a lot of that to do with the effort that has been putting on that fundraising front. We had the stadium naming competition, which Chris Sweet won so famously. There's been the auction of the shirts from the Oldham game, one of which I can see hanging behind you there, Seb.
Yeah.
I'm sure you paid a pretty penny for. There's been on the season ticket front, overwhelmed with the fact that people have paid for season tickets and seen very little football. We're very well aware of that. Unfortunately, obviously, the situation is such an unknown that we don't want to be 1 week offering you a refund and next week sending tickets again. I thank people before, I think, in social media for their patience on that, and I'd ask for their continued patience on that until the landscape is clearer. Obviously, we'll just leave it as is, and then we'll start managing these things when we know where we're going to be playing football again. All of these things have added to that financial stability I talked about earlier and helped us to be in a positive position. But it doesn't end there, and we do need to build towards next season and beyond. It's not easy, but we will be going out to people and asking them to support us going forward, and it's very important. Those sorts of activities that we've been entering into have really meant a lot to us. It's great to see that sort of support from the supporters, and alongside that also FootMob have been a brilliant supporter of the football club over the last couple of seasons, and it's so important that things of that nature are in place. And any other local businesses that are out there that want to get involved and want to show how they support a community asset like this is a really good time to get on board, come and be part of the Hampton and Richmond Borough family and drive this club forward, onwards and upwards. And we've got real ambitions for this football club, and whilst we have this hiatus at the moment where we're unable to really push it forward as such on the pitch, we can still do a lot in the background to make this club bigger and better and stronger, and that is something to look forward to. As you say, it's rubbish that this is our centenary year and we're in this position, to be honest, because if it was business as usual, we would already be working and doing things and having activities around that centenary celebration. It would be a real shame if we have to delay that, but if we have to delay it, we will, because there's no point in having a centenary celebration without the people who really matter, the fans in the ground. And I think May would have been the actual centenary. The likelihood of us being able to have fans back in the ground by then is not great, let's face it. But we will celebrate that landmark, and that really important landmark, something which demonstrates how important this football club is and how it has survived over the years with the support of that community. We will make sure that it is recognised in the right way at the right time.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things about the centenary we'll probably be putting during this hiatus a little bit, certainly we won't be at games, unfortunately, and it would have been nice to carry on the streaming work and all that with the great volunteers. There's a chance for fans, if you have any ideas whatsoever, or any things that you think might help, or you want to help in any way at all, then please just get in touch. But I suppose just very, very lastly, and again, turn on a positive, Gary, I looked at the table today for what it's worth, and we are 7 points behind the leaders with 2 games in hand. Despite everything that's gone on, that must be a pretty good feeling to have carried on the momentum from last season. And who knows what will happen in the future. But I think, are you proud as a manager and also proud of the players in the football club?
Yeah, yeah, very much, Seb. I think that's the biggest difficulty in management, is continuing on from a season of relative success before. And I think when you start earning your stripes and you start becoming one of the teams in a division that is respected and is in a sense feared, and teams don't like playing against you, you have to raise your bar with it, because teams are knowing that they're in for a difficult game, and that comes with its own challenges. And I've emphasised that so many times to the group. I speak to virtually all the managers in the division, and the respect that we've formed over the course of the last 12, 18 months has been pretty evident to me. And and I wouldn't say every, but most of the teams we've played against this year, the comments from the managers have been we're one of the best teams we've played, if not the best team they've played. And some of them have been in wins, some of them have been in defeats even. So, that in itself is that bit of mutual respect that you get. But it's a change room that I do believe in now, Seb. I've said to you on numerous occasions, we've taken a period of time to get it where it needs to be. We've had to build 3 teams, haven't we, over the course of the last 2.5 years? But I think this is as strong as we've got. I think we're aware of what the National League South demands and needs and requires, and I think we've got a really good squad, not just a good 11, a really good squad at present. We've had to cope without Luke Ruddock and Charlie Wassemer for most of this season, and we found ourselves in a really healthy position in the table, and they're about just coming back now as well. So this 2-week break, I think we'll see. You've seen Luke in recent weeks, but Charlie's been in and amongst both the training games in recent weeks, and he's up and running as well now. So we're healthy and ready, and it's a really pleasing place to be in the division, but it's somewhere we want to be come the end of May. If we can get playing again and continue the the hard work that we've been putting in on the pitch and we can secure a playoff place or even better, then what an end to this season will be. We're in and around that centenary mark. Like Jax has just said, it's a landmark that most football clubs have maybe get to without the hard work of what we've put in to get us here. We've got to do our bit on the pitch, Seb, if we get back and finish the hard work that we started. It's pleasing to be where we are, but it's only very much a work in progress.
Well, let's hope in a couple of weeks' time, or maybe it might even be a bit longer, maybe even if it's 4 weeks' time, that we are back. We are all back at, I say we, as in the players and the essential staff, are back at the Beaver, or an away ground in the National League South, because it would be great to carry on that work. Thanks very much for both Gary and Jax for giving up there Saturday morning, and Phil, of course, listening in. And hopefully this has been of use, and hope you can appreciate that the situation's changing daily and almost hourly at some points, and it's not always possible for us to get all the information and all the things out there that we would like to as a football club. So just please bear with us. And there's obviously a lot of information and things are changing all the time. So when we do put information out, we want to make sure it's the right information and the most accurate information. And thanks for everyone who sent questions in. It's really appreciated. Maybe we'll try and do this when things are a little bit clearer, but thanks very much for listening, everyone. And thanks to Gary, Jax and Phil. And let's hope that we can get back to football very soon. Cheers.